Well, good morning. Joost Allard with Learn Deep for the Inspired Community. And we're once again together on Friday morning talking about um, the featured program partner interview. This week, we're having Michael Timm from Reflo, well-known organization in Milwaukee doing lots of good things in terms of green, sustainable environment, water topics, etc. They have their hands in many different things and support many different initiatives. Um, I'll let Michael talk about what his role is and that type of thing because he probably knows that much better than how I could describe it. But let me just say that we're happy to have Michael represent Reflo this morning as our contact with Reflo as a partner. And let's go into the interview and let Michael explain what Reflow does and why it's relevant to us in the fellows program and you as a fellow teacher. So Michael, welcome this morning.
Thank you, Juice. It's good to be
Um,
here.
yes, well, we've had to wait for you a little bit. So I'm glad we can get you on the schedule. I understand you're more busy during the summer than other times. So we're really glad that you were able to make it. Um, let's start with, and I always like to do this. Let's talk a little bit about the person representing the organization. I think what many people are going to be interested in is not just what your role is, but how did you get there and what excites you about what you're doing with Reflow, for Reflow, on behalf of Reflow?
Sure. So Michael Timm, I manage the Milwaukee Water Stories program for the nonprofit Reflo. Um, and how did I get here? It's a long and winding road, but it's interesting and it does tie in with my passions. I'm from Milwaukee. When I was growing up, I would go down by Lake Michigan a lot. We'd bike down there. And I went to school in Ripon, so away from a great lake. But when I was coming back to Milwaukee, one of the things that, when you're looking for a job, was offered a job out in the middle of Iowa, but working for a newspaper, I kind of had a momentary existential crisis of like, I don't know that I want to do this. The job would have been okay, but like to be that far away from the city, to be far away from a lake, I actually had like a moment of like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to stay? And Milwaukee was a big part of that. So I decided to stay in Milwaukee. Ended up working in local journalism for a number of years. Got really interested in water because of the emerging School of Freshwater Sciences. I went to grad school there and kind of pivoted my career trajectory into the science communication space, which I'm privileged to play in with Reflow, managing a number of different public engagement education products that support the mission. And so to share about Reflow, Reflow is a nonprofit that supports a number of different community-based water projects in Milwaukee. And so that's an important part of the process. Reflow works with a lot of schools in schoolyard redevelopment. So kind of going from asphalt to green space and then programming that and integrating that with partners, getting a lot of people to the table. So Reflow, my partners, my colleagues, much more than I, are really great at that kind of collaborative mentality. And that's a challenge, of course, as you can
Mhm.
understand working within any bureaucracy or system of bureaucracies. So I really admire a lot of the work that happens from a process standpoint for how Reflow does work, and that's one of the reasons that even though I'm a freelancer, I stick around because it's really important work. I believe in it. We're talking about how do we materially make a difference with respect to challenges like climate change and environmental justice. And it's my job is to help talk the talk, but the folks
Mhm.
that I work with really walk that talk, and I'm really pleased about that relationship. But what do I do at Reflow in the Milwaukee Water Stories program? It's it's managing a lot of different resources that are for the public, for educators, for nonprofits, to understand their relationship with water in Milwaukee better or in a new way. Um, and I don't know if it makes sense at this point to share screen or if you want me to go
It-
back into bio or
no, no, go ahead. Go ahead and share at the time that it's relevant for what you want to talk about.
I'm going to try to share my screen here and
Mhm.
I'm going to just share this page. I think that should be what we want. Um, So this is So Reflo, if you're interested down the road in checking out Reflo and all the program areas, green and healthy schools, rainwater harvesting for urban ag, innovative placemaking, these are sort of other program areas that I am involved in, but I'm not as directly responsible for, and also an environmental intern program. My role is really to manage the Milwaukee Water Stories program, and the shorthand is we manage and curate resources. We call it the map, the app, a game, and then there's also a virtual water table, which I won't spend too much time on in this interview, but it's a great resource. Check it out. And then
Yeah.
interviewing a lot of people about their perspectives on water and showcasing that in different place-based ways, and then supporting school activities that I think we will spend a little bit more time on
Hmm.
here. But uh, without going into terrible amount of depth, if you're looking for a way to use interactive web maps to support your student experiences around water in Milwaukee, this is a great free tool you can do. Feel free to reach out to me later if you want to know more. But one of the things we've done over the past couple of years is unite a lot of different entities in sharing their water stories on different perspectives. And then there's a number of different web maps that you can access that help to showcase those perspectives. An easy one to kind of advertise in terms of what does this mean is, where is your watershed? So as a
Hmm.
conversation starter for any educator, student, etc., like the question of reorienting yourself on the landscape to where's my watershed as opposed to like what state am I in or what city am I in or what
Hmm.
county am I in, what is your watershed makes you think about your relationship to water in a different way, and it has an importance. So these maps show the watersheds of Milwaukee, and then as just an example, um, we can include clickable data, stories, context there as well, and students can actually make these maps depending on what their interest is. We have um, a tool called the Milwaukee Story Mapper that allows for a group of people, if you want to get together and decide, oh, we want to make a map about some experience of water in Milwaukee. It's fairly intuitive, and I can help folks walk through that process. If this is a tool that you feel is reasonable for can support what you want to do, it's fairly intuitive. You end up putting into your content in the web, and then you can download and interact with a map, similar to this one, that could
Hmm.
really help tell a story that you're interested in your students exploring. So that's one of the tools and resources we manage that I can help you with. Um, I'm rambling, Juice. Do you want me to pivot here, or how are you feeling?
No, no, go ahead. Tell us about what Reflow has to offer for our fellows, for teachers. Um, we talked a little bit about before the interview. We talked a little bit about what do you have that they can use right off the bat that you know works because you worked with other teachers on this.
Yeah,
So maybe touch on that first, and then you know maybe we could talk about other ideas that you might have, or let's at least talk about your experience, um, how other teachers have been able to use what you have. That may cause our fellows to think through, oh, maybe I could use it this way, or maybe I could plan it in at this time in the project.
sure. No, that sounds good. So another resource that teachers have used to take like mini field trips around the city, and we kind of pitch it as Pokemon Go for water stories. There's these 6 locations, 5 that are really publicly accessible on any given day that you can, if you download this free app, it's not perfect, but it does work. And if you go to these different locations around the city, there's hidden water stories there that you can interact with, and it's kind of like
Mm.
a scavenger hunt. So it's a way to make history come alive. It's a way to
Hmm.
connect the history of land and water use in Milwaukee, like right in our city, cross connect with efforts that are happening to make a difference about water into the future, like green infrastructure.
Hmm.
So Reflow supports a lot of green infrastructure projects. Green infrastructure being, nature inspired systems to manage stormwater and create a more, like biophilic environment. It's
Hmm.
good for solving a lot of problems like stormwater management, but it also has a lot of other benefits. And this app, which is kind of structured as an adventure across the city, was really like a first step in helping to help to normalize that idea, like get us
Hmm.
connected with where green infrastructure is in our city so that this is a normal thing. This isn't some abstract random thing that's so hard to do. Like there's lots of examples of it happening throughout the city, but we have to kind of attune ourselves to it by calling attention to it. So that's what this experience can do.
So I have a
Um,
question. I have a question about that.
yeah,
So who came up with the different adventures? Was that Reflo that designed those, or
yep.
was there?
Yeah, I was really privileged to be able to kind of be on all ends of this project. So
Mhm.
to go into it a little bit deeper, so I maybe it's worth backing into a little bit of bio here because this relates with the why of this story. So
Okay,
when I was at School of Freshwater Sciences and even before, um, a big narrative that you learn about there is the invasive species impact on aquatic systems.
sure.
And so as I was going through that, graduate school, I was also thinking about my time as a journalist and like how does behavior actually change? What really sticks with you emotionally, learning, etc. And I had done an interactive theater experience that I wrote and directed. That was like an interactive murder mystery, and I found that
Mm.
people really like put themselves into a different emotional space of accessibility when you're playing a game experience like that than if you're just being told something, you're reading it, you're learning it in a different way. Of course, people
Yeah,
have different learning modes, but that's something I observed that stuck with me. And I thought, if I can do this for like local entertainment, um, why can't we leverage local entertainment and game design to focus on some of these complex social environmental challenges that we have? Like, why can we turn that method um, towards that goal? And
yeah.
so the outgrowth of this was I was really passionate about games, and particularly making my own called Muscle Madness, which was for the teachers who are familiar with the concept of the tragedy of the commons. It turns the tragedy of the commons on its head. So the tragedy of the commons is an economics principle that basically says if you have a common resource and there's no like structure in place of some kind, people will be self-interested to exhaust it beyond, to deplete the resource, even if it seems like they're not, they're acting in, they might want to act well, but you'll deplete this resource. It was coming
Yeah.
out of the idea of a common a green in England where the cows are grazing it and they're overgrazing it. So that's how the name came about. But the game says if you are one of the Great Lakes, but if any one of these Great Lakes loses, no one can win. So that's the
Mm.
premise of the game. And as you get invaded by mussels, these little hair clips with eyeballs in the game, um, that kids were playing. This is probably better to have the slideshow on the back. This is a early prototyping, right? Um, uh, you get to see the devastation of the invasive mussels kind of increasing exponentially as
Hmm.
your resource depletes, and you want to save yourself. You want to save. These are actually the really old photos. You want to save your lake, but if anybody loses, then no one can win. So that
Right.
mentality of cooperative gameplay was really powerful. The reason that's connected with your question about Water Story Milwaukee is so I had created this game, brought it into the world, and if teachers are interested in playing it, we do have copies that they can borrow, or it's available from the public library system. This was students
Hmm.
at University School Milwaukee playing it.
Yep.
There's some grad students playing it. It's a really cool experience. People like it. They don't have to be kids, but it plays well for kids.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had made this game, and I had this. I was connected with someone in Madison who was connected with a whole network of people who are into games and learning. And I became fascinated about that. But at the same time, I was like, well, we can do some kind of place-based experience um, where it's kind of like a scavenger hunt across Milwaukee, but it's related to water. So it was my concept. And I went to the executive director of Reflo and said, hey, I think we've got something here. Are you interested in this? And he said, sure. If you could write some grants to support this, then let's do it.
Hmm.
Because he was
Right.
also passionate about gameplay and saw the potential to motivate behavior this way. So in terms of the
Okay.
design, yes, Reflo designed these little adventures, but we interacted with different community stakeholders who had some interest in sharing that story. So in this case of the
Hmm.
brewery neighborhood, which is already a number of years old now, but this was a photographer who had photographed those old buildings and done
Hmm.
a coffee table book about it, and he was gracious enough about kind of annotating that experience as part of scavenger hunt. You run to the brewery neighborhood, which is now just west of the Deer District, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and there's a lot of green infrastructure there. Actually, it's the first LEED certified neighborhood in either the world or the country. I have to remind myself.
Mm.
Um, and 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 you follow the path of grain that would have come off of the beer line to go and feed this brewery, 100 plus years ago. So there's
Right.
the history aspect with the green infrastructure, and then you get points as you hit these spots. So it's hidden, and to me that's really interesting. Anything that's hidden in plain sight that you can kind of make
Hmm.
visual or tangible is kind of powerful because it's something that you'll remember the next time you go by it. It'll stick with you
Right.
in a different way. So that was the methods of the madness. This one is at the Collectivo on the lakefront.
Yep.
You're probably familiar. They got a cool museum in there. The MMSD curates. It's awesome. This building used to be a pump house, and the
Yep.
story of it is that it was, pumping water in the 1880s to flush out the Milwaukee River because it had gotten so polluted.
Mm.
And now it's no longer used for that purpose, but you're able to tell the story of how things have changed. And so we invite sort of a different kind of scavenger hunt here to like discover things in that museum, because even though the museum is there, a lot of people maybe aren't actually interacting with the museum. So it's a reason to interact with the museum. And
Yeah.
then Bradford Beach is a good example of like, we interviewed a number of different people, including Senator Larson, um, and also went down to the polar bear plunge. And if you walk the beach as a
Mm.
beachcomber and interact with different people's perspectives around water, it's kind of like a free for all
Hmm.
experience that is more what we did when we did an event we called the Great Water Race. It was like people were running, to try to get through all these things, and they're interacting with things that you might not expect because of that. So we use
Hmm.
the structure of the experience to kind of open people up to different possibilities. And you can
Hmm.
use this modularly. You don't have to do the whole thing. You can just go to one site like Turtle Park, which is the River Revitalization Foundation maintains a really beautiful landscape right off the Milwaukee River. This is North Avenue. This is Humboldt, and
Hmm.
it's a publicly accessible, privately owned parcel off of this Turtle um, Trail, which is really, really cool. And then we partnered with Exfabula, the storytelling group, to
Yeah.
share people's perspectives as you kind of walk this path. You're
Hmm.
interacting with different people's perspectives. And if you were to get out in a canoe, you could actually interact with some of the voice stories, which are in the river only. So there's that incentive to kind of this.
Oh, really?
Um, I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be taking your
So,
students.
so I have a so to
Go ahead.
well, I was going to say to sort of round out this segment talking about the water stories or the urban adventure app. Um, is there are you looking to do more of these? And is there an opportunity for our fellows to think about how can we contribute to that?
Yes. So the short story is, do we want to do more? Yes. And that there's complicated answers to exactly what that looks
Of
like.
course. Yeah.
Part of that is the content is growing through both the Milwaukee Community Map that I shared earlier, and also the
Yep.
project called Watermarks, which connects artists, scientists, and community members around water in different neighborhoods. And so
Hmm.
over the past year, I was involved in interviewing a number of different partners to share perspectives on water
Hmm.
from their interests. So a lot of it was the science folks at School of Freshwater Sciences, for example. And the
Hmm.
long-term vision is for all this web content, which if we look at this here, it's it's thematically organized. You have like your lead video, and then you have thematic videos, and then you have different people you could meet. So if we want to meet meet Becky or
Hmm.
meet Jeff, you can learn about what Jeff is doing right at School of Freshwater Sciences, a little bit of
Hmm.
his story, and long term, this content will be married with that app experience. I don't have a
Okay.
timeline on that, but that's the overall long term vision.
Hmm.
And so we're working with a someone who might be able to help make that happen in a way that's beyond the pilot. And I don't have a timing on that because there's a lot of
Okay.
uncertainties, but that's the vision on one end. The other end
Hmm.
is that we'd also work with, I don't have like something to pop up on the screen, but we work with Golda Meir School because they were
Yep.
really interested in adding their own layer to this app. And
Yeah.
um, it evolved a little bit because it was really student driven. The students at Golda who were mostly middle grades, upper middle grades, some of them who were really into coding, um, they really wanted to do like a gamified experience on their playground, which had gone through a schoolyard redevelopment. So that I think I
Hmm.
might have a picture of to kind of to anchor people here. Big part of what Reflo does is interact with these schools, but at
Okay.
Golda, this slideshow probably will visually kind of communicate what was going on there. Maybe they've got them, maybe they don't have a total new shot in there. I'm not sure. Um, as their playground was being redone, a teacher was also interested in. I guess it's not the best. They thought they had the picture up there yet, but maybe they don't. Um, and having the students do a moving exercise. So they had a challenge to do can we get our students exercising? Can we get them moving? Basically, an
Okay.
incentive for the students to move their bodies to exercise for fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And the students, they had that design challenge and they decided prior to me being involved at all, they said, we want to do an app. And so the students and Tina reached out to Reflo because they knew we had the Water Story app and like, hey, can you help us? And I was like, sure. So I helped them use the platform that we use to pilot the app to build their own experience on that playground where their
Right.
students can run around according to the game that those students have goal to design. So that is something that we are able to support, but it's really driven by like what the teachers and the students are interested in.
Okay.
Long
Okay.
term, we would love for, if a school is involved in this green schools process, to add their stories to that app experience. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of, you know, things on the technical and the political and the financial end that will be, you know, hurdles to get through to get to that space. But that's the vision with storytelling at all of these schoolyards that are going through redevelopment. All of them have a water story because of what's going on at those playgrounds or those schoolyards. And so, yes, we wanted to grow, but driven by like a group that is going to take shepherding of the content. So
Yeah.
that's where we again we're this Milwaukee Story Mapper tool on the screen. It may not look all that, you know, all that sexy, but this is all of this on the back end allows for anyone to kind of curate their own story, and then we can
Mm-hmm.
incorporate that into the digital tools through the Milwaukee Community Map and ultimately through this app.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then,
So can we go back to where you had the no where we were talking about Golda Meir
yeah,
and the schoolyard redevelopment. Can we go
yeah,
back to that list?
mhm.
Because I think I saw at least one. There you go. I think I saw at least one of the schools that is involved with um, as a fellow. So we
Hayes,
I
Hayes.
see Hayes for sure. Hayes bilingual. Um, yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
right.
so Hayes is in the middle of their process.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not the person to speak most closely to on this, but there's this the brochure is actually probably a good way to show what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is the redevelopment that is being proposed based on
Okay.
the conceptual planning process of the Hayes Green Team for
Mm-hmm.
the schoolyard. So it's pretty
Okay.
dramatic if you consider how tightly packed that parcel is.
Yeah.
And then used as fundraising levers to go to different partners and showcase the vision in the sense of rallying support behind it. So I think
Mm-hmm.
Hayes
Mm-hmm.
is in that part of the process. They're in fundraising and looking to um, do construction in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So that's definitely something for not only for the teachers at Hayes that are in the fellows program, but maybe to consider to incorporate this into whichever learning experience they're going to be designing. Just wanted to point that out, not necessary to stop there long, but just so that people are aware. Um, okay, so other programs that you think are worthwhile for the fellows to be aware of?
yeah, I really glossed over the market community map because it can become complex quickly. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to spend this time on that. But what I do want to suggest is, and maybe this video, I don't know, sometimes doing video in Zoom doesn't work well, but this is just background. We
Mm-hmm.
an example of how we integrate the Milwaukee community map into like a field exercise that you could consider involving students in. This was a Escuela Verde, so this was a high school, and
Yep.
Reflo and MMSD were both involved in like working with the teachers there and the students. Um, but we help them uh, basically go into their alley which was what drains into a catchment that was being considered for green infrastructure project. So from an
Okay.
engineering standpoint, the question was, well, how big does this thing need to be? And from the water quality standpoint, the question is, well, what would it be treating? You know, like what is it? What is the
Mm-hmm.
benefit it's providing? This so here's the alley. This was 3 teams of students. So doing science, you know you can have different people look at the same space and come up with different results, and
Yep.
that's
Yep.
science. So like this was valuable from you have 3 different teams looking at the same shared space, this alleyway, but coming up with 3 different maps that they drew on a clipboard.
Yep.
And then they took photos of water quality impairment issues like um, those transformer boxes that might have been, you know, dripping
Mm-hmm.
um, harmful materials over time. Then they went then to Google Earth and drew polygons based on the maps they drew because they're looking to. The question was, if you look at these garages lining this alley, like where is the water going to go into this alley? And if you get
Mm-hmm.
then an area drawn on the map, you can calculate based on a presumed or designed rainfall intensity how much water you would be having to manage. So there was a
Yep.
real engineering, a STEM challenge of like, okay, how big do we need to make this thing to hold the water we want it to hold? Well, you need to get the area to know what the volume is going to be. Um, and so that's what the students did. So Justin is showing the the students presenting their 3 different
Mm-hmm.
maps to their whole school. This was done in the space of about 3 hours. Um,
Really?
so they Verde, of course, is a little bit more flexible in how they can use their time. But yeah,
Yep.
there was a little bit of prompting. Um, there was there was the field exercise. There was then going to the computer to connect the photos and the mapping and using the story mapper to do that, and then the presentation. And so this is
Mm-hmm.
just a slideshow of their maps that the students made. And it in the live version, you click on those and it pops up the photos with the annotation of why they felt there was a water quality concern. And then the
Mm-hmm.
areas outside of that boundary were like opportunities for additional catchment. So if you wanted to maximize the volume capture, you might want to extend that geography. So by
Mm-hmm.
redirecting a downspout, for example. And so the students were thinking through that process of like, if they're going to be engineers for a system that would be going in down here, what do they need to consider? And then we
Mm-hmm.
host their maps in what we call the student showcase on the Milwaukee community map. So
Okay.
it's at the bottom of the map where we put the things that aren't necessarily like curated by me or curated by a community partner, but that are curated by students. And so that's a great opportunity for like an endpoint for some kind of project. If you wanted to follow that model that we use with Verde, um, we have developed a lesson plan with the support materials that you could do that in a comparable area that's important to your school or your students. So
Mm-hmm.
it's modular in the sense that it's adaptable to a different school context.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a way that you can kind of connect the abstract story mapping idea with an activity that's related to water that might be
Mm-hmm.
very local to a school. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as a,
Yes,
as a
very cool.
so um, I would be remiss if I didn't put this up on the screen. This is a game inspired by Milwaukee's water history that we have created, and it ties in with a number of our short videos or water story videos that kind of give you a little snapshot of the real history. So I'll let folks discover that if you're interested, rather than play it here. But um, the premise here is it's a 5-player game where you step into a different role and are playing through choices in Milwaukee's history that relate to water. And
Okay.
so it's inspired by the real history, but you're empowered to make a choice about what you want to do, but you have
Mm-hmm.
different perspectives about that. So it doesn't try to just say that any perspective is bad or wrong. It acknowledges that people are coming from a different perspective. They're going to have different, abilities or insights that they can do, and so it creates this kind of interesting space for what does cooperation really mean and how challenging is cooperation, and maybe now you can understand why things that we think are environmentally very problematic today, why someone may have made that choice 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, it's a way to involve your students at a different level, either at an extracurricular experience, or if there's someone who is interested in really going at this. I'd love to have that conversation to help share this game. um,
Mm-hmm.
it's really designed for 5 players plus like a teacher to guide the experience. So it is
Mm-hmm.
it is intended to be educational, but it does stand on its own as a fun experience. But it wants guidance. It wants some structure around it. So.
Okay. Well, that sounds to me like a theme that's sort of going through what you've been sharing this morning. Is this opportunity for teachers to incorporate um, any one of the certainly the game experiences or the storytelling experiences as maybe more of a sort of an early to mid opportunity to uh, expand people's or students' awareness of sort of the constraints, the conflicts, the roles that they may play as they discover an issue that they're passionate about and maybe decide that they want to advocate for a solution that they come up with. Um, Not that the game is going to help them create the solution, but it's going to help them develop the empathy they need to learn to listen to different perspectives, different voices in the community, and incorporate that into um, either the way they talk about what they're passionate about, or uh, in terms of coming up with a solution that may be more inclusive than before they started the project.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I would love for people to see it exactly that way, because as much as it's about the history of water in Milwaukee, it really is that. Like, that's the
mhm,
value of the experience, is recognizing that roles are coming from different places, and that you might consider other people's perspectives differently because all of a sudden you're assigned one that isn't what you're native to. And that there's a
mhm.
dissonance there. And so it could be challenging for younger learners depending on what their kind of emotional maturity is, because it's
Sure, yeah.
not easy for adults to step into different roles per se. That's
Mhm,
what makes it interesting, but it does have that potential power.
mhm,
It's certainly not the only game that can do that, but it does do that. I've seen it as people play it together. I've seen after the first level or the first experience or so, when people are figuring out the nuts and bolts of it, then they jump into those roles. And that's interesting to see how people decide to play that role, and where those tension zones are. So
mhm,
yeah, I
mhm,
appreciate that comment.
mhm. Um, uh, have you covered
Yeah,
sort
I
of
think
the program
I've blasted them with so much. I feel like I want to kind of
yeah.
calm
Well,
it down a
that's
little
why
bit.
we record, right? That's why we recorded. They can listen back and pick up things that they didn't,
Cool.
excuse me, didn't notice the first time. Um, and we imagine that the teachers will come back to this maybe a couple of times in the next couple of months, not just in a day.
Yeah.
Um, any initiatives that Reflow is sort of thinking about, not necessarily something that's available now, that would be interesting for the teachers to be aware of, and maybe even I don't, you can say whether this is feasible, but is there some role that the teachers can play, teachers and working with their students can play as you're going through thinking about the initiative to provide you some input?
Yeah, and actually, I would say there is. We're through the Milwaukee Community Map. We're currently, it's not published yet, but we're currently working on exploring the themes of climate change, tourism, and public project collaborations around water. And so
Hmm.
recently, this is being recorded in July. We just had a meeting on July 13th of inviting sort of a round of stakeholder perspectives on some of these draft visions of 50 years in the future in Milwaukee. And
Okay.
so actually, if any of the teachers are interested in being part of that and providing feedback, I would love for that, even in through August, because we're getting more feedback in August. And as we revise these kind of, some people have compared them like National Geographic renderings. They're kind of on that order. It's like if we think
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
2071, and if we think, I mean, there's so many things to react to: environmental injustice, systemic racism, so many challenges that we're facing as a society.
Yep.
Sometimes we're very reactive about things, and this exercise is an opportunity to be like, and if we get it right in 50 years, if we come together, what does this look like from the perspective of water?
Mhm.
And part of that is, what does it visually look like to stimulate the imagination? And that's where we're inviting input from people like, what do you think should be here? What shouldn't be here? Whose perspectives should be included in this? The teachers or the students would be very much appreciated for feedback on that. Because I'm imagining and envisioning that it is another one of those tools for the teachers and their students into the future, because it's the next generation of people who are leading the city, the ones who will
Right.
be our age in 2071. They're not born yet right now, or they're in school right now. So like
Yep.
there's that is what does that look like for them is very important question. So I would love feedback on that. Would also love for teachers to want to use those resources to help stimulate those kinds of conversations in the classroom
Right.
down the road. So that would be the
Right.
easy one to say, short to medium term. That'll be appended to the Milwaukee community map. So later this year, sometime after Labor Day, there'll be more of those resources kind of rolled out. But right now is a great time for feedback on it.
How do teachers predominantly at this point give you feedback? Is there a meeting organized, or is it a survey, or
Yeah,
what do you
we're
have?
gonna have another. So they'll be at a conference in August as printouts, but then we'll have another meeting on August 17th that'll be by Zoom. So
Mhm.
if on August 17th there's folks who want to take a look at this in a live Zoom meeting, that's a
Mhm.
possibility. Otherwise, we also have I can send you, Juice, the link, and you can post it later. Boards of the 3 drafts with the annotations
Okay.
from the first round of stakeholders. And any of the teachers would be welcome to take a look at those and then email me with their thoughts.
Mhm.
Because the boards are still live, they could still put like post-it notes on them, but I'm assembling all that feedback right now. So if they have thoughts, they should email me in addition to
Mhm.
putting a post-it note on that board.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
can share that with whomever. We haven't published that yet. They're draft, they're going to change. But they kind of give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I'm thinking of 2071. What do we mean by that?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll send you that link so they can take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's of general interest enough that we would probably put that in the general community of Inspired, as opposed to limited to just a fellow space.
Cool. Yeah, and we're working on inviting at a sort of a very deliberate manner other stakeholders to provide feedback as well. So like this would be great. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so that's definitely one. Uh, that there could be that direct input on. As far as ways that teachers and students could, like provide other feedback or on initiatives. I think your point about the schoolyard redevelopment process is good, is well taken, because like if
Hmm.
there is interest in that from their school, they're curious about it. I think that would be a great opportunity for feedback. There's a there's a group, it's a kind of a loose network called the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee. And
Okay.
they do an annual conference, and Reflo is involved in administering the consortium. But it's really a lot of educators from the Milwaukee area who are sharing best practices, sharing
Hmm.
resources. A lot of it's around water because of the stormwater management driven um, green infrastructure initiatives, but it's not
Right.
all on that. There's also a lot of, you know, how am I teaching social emotional learning? And I know that this is not my bailiwick per se, but like there's a lot of that kind of cross connection about how do we use these places that are being changed
Hmm.
to do other things, or to do things that they're not, maybe from the stormwater funder perspective, that's not what they're designed for, but from a community perspective, that's what they're used for. Like let's
Hmm.
use them well. So I
Okay.
would suggest the Green Schools Consortium, and I can provide that link as
Yeah,
well.
can you do that? Then we can post that as a separate sort of article / opportunity.
Yeah,
Um, I believe you mentioned it's taking place in the was it first week of August or last week of July?
for the feedback meeting.
No, no, for the Green Schools
The conference is
conference.
August 6th. Yeah, August
August
6th. So
6th.
I
Yeah,
know that has
yeah,
that conflict with the
yeah.
fellows, but August 6th at Fondy Market is the this year's conference. It's a little
Hmm.
different because of COVID. It won't be, every year feels a little different, but last year it was
Right.
held virtually. This year it will be in person. Um,
Okay.
I think they've got over 30 exhibitors who tend to be local environmental-ish groups who have
Sure.
offerings for teachers. So for those educators who haven't been familiar with that network, it's a great networking opportunity to learn about
Yeah.
like how another entity might support the school.
Yeah.
But if they are familiar with it, then the consortium itself is a great network to keep pulse of, um, even if you're not able to be at the conference.
Okay. We'll make sure that we share those, how to access those
Cool.
resources.
Yeah, and I think it longer term, again, I'm not the schoolyards person, but
Sure.
there's a lot of buy-in that happens there, at the local level. And I think one of the things I've noticed is there's there's a there's a great, process of making sure that it's not contingent on any one individual to make those things go forward, because you
Hmm.
can have a school administrator who leaves, who gets promoted, or who moves
Yep.
laterally, and in some cases initiatives follow the administrator. In the case of the green schools process, there's, because of this green team model of like, there's a shared team who's kind of responsible for making the pitch for why they should even be able to move forward on
Okay.
something, such that you're going to have a little bit more longevity baked into that process, because there's a
Hmm.
team involved who, even if you lose one or two people, or you gain two or three new people,
Hmm.
there's the ability for it to continue. So I've
Yep.
really witnessed the strength of that process, and then also its focus on the long term, operation and maintenance of these spaces. Because as you read more about, like, you can do a lot of things that are like capital intensive, or even like greening intensive, like let's plant a million trees, but if half of them die because no one's taking care of them, then they're
Yep.
not doing that function. So like, you want to be very deliberate about, um, and flexible about how these things are maintained over time, because that's important for their long-term success. And so I've seen that this process, as sort of a semi-external observer, is really one that nurtures that mentality, so that there will be those questions taken into account and somebody's responsible for it. Um, so
Hmm.
if there's a teacher who's interested in providing that kind of lens at their school, or learning what others are doing to bring it back, that mentality back to their school, I think it's a
Yep.
interesting model.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing and explaining that. um, we're getting closer to sort of our time. Um, One thing that maybe the fellows, maybe as a summary, fellows might be interested in is sort of to understand a little bit what Reflow sees as the value and the opportunity to be involved with the fellows program. We talked to you. We knew you before. We talked about the fellows program, but when we approached Reflow, Justin and yourself, um, it was almost a no-brainer to say, yeah, we support this initiative. Talk a little bit about what you see as the real value um, for the teachers, for the students, and for you as an organization to be involved with this.
Yeah, as Justin was mentioned, Justin Hagerty is the executive director of Reflow, and he definitely does see the value in all these connections as well. Um, from my perspective, the value is really, sharing with you the educators who are involved in this process, because you're an audience who's already demonstrating interest and motivation in something a little bit innovative, and the resources that Reflow provides are really well suited for that kind of audience. The teachers who we have worked with have felt like they've been cut of that kind of cloth, and so I was excited about participating in the fellows program because of all of you. And where you decide to take that relationship is totally in your court, because I exist, that we're here, we can do stuff, but we're not trying to push. We're trying to, you know, allow folks to nudge when they're ready.
Okay.
So that was what was exciting. And in terms of the excitement for the students, I mean, that's what it's all about. Is, you know, we would love for these resources to help actually change or open the minds of students, because that's what we believe is really important for long-term future of society. I mean,
Mhm.
that's as simple as it is. With we're that kind of decision making is important, and we're interested in serving kids. We're not formal educators, or I'm not a formal educator. I'm an informal educator, but those who are formal educators sometimes look for folks like us who can kind of add a little spark to something. And if I can do that, then I'm doing my job well.
Mhm.
And if it leads to other connections, even if it's not me, like I'm also doing my job well because I'm also kind of like a node for other folks. So I would love to,
Mhm.
even if something that the teachers are seeing here isn't like, no, I can't use that, it's too much, or I don't know how to do that, or if there's those hurdles or boundaries, one, I could help to overcome them. But even if that is a hurdle, like I might be able to direct you to someone who is more in concert with what you're looking for.
Mhm. Mhm.
There is Reflo also maintains what's called the Eco Literacy Challenge, which is kind of another resource network of folks who are providing some kind of water educational resources in Milwaukee area, and they want to reach teachers. It's kind of like a matchmaking thing for teachers. Not exactly
Mhm.
designed that way, but you want to find out about what Riverkeeper can do. You want to find out what Reflo can do. You want to find out what Sea Grant can do. You want to find out what these organizations you never heard of that are doing something that might be interesting to you. Like we recognize that matchmaking is a challenge for educators because they're stressed and pulled in so many
Yeah.
different directions and
Yep.
so many constraints. So my colleagues really were in the lead on that, but it's a resource of resources, which again might be
Mhm.
overwhelming, but also might be exactly the right thing. If you click, boom, that you got the thing you want, even if it's
Yeah.
not me, even if it's not Reflow, then we're doing our job if we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also we're very much aligned as far as reflow and learn deep in that sense. And that's part of why we're doing these recorded interviews. It's one thing to put a flyer into, a fellow space or wherever you might want to put that. But it doesn't really come to life and it doesn't really, spark, oh, wait, I could use this for that, and then I can achieve that with my students, right? So, bringing it to life by introducing a point of contact in a video format, I think has a lot more impact.
And
So,
and then to the global question of like teacher feedback on initiatives, like just in general, like if this stimulates the imagination of one of you to be like, oh, can you do this, or what about this, like that's also a great question for us because even if we can't do it right now, like we know that you want it, so like tell us what you want really is also a thing. Like if any of this appeals as a resource, that would be something I would invite feedback on generally, not like a specific thing, but like if there's a gap that you're feeling that something in this space could address, then we to be for us to be aware of that, to hear it from you, can
mhm.
inform how we design next steps of things.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that would be valuable globally as well to hear what teachers want. I know maybe that lots of people are asking that question, but like I would like to know, like if what do you want, right?
right, right. Yeah, and for one thing, people are always busy, so you can't reach them with that question so easily, and then it's not an opportune time. It's not on their mind. Um, so yeah, creating those opportunities for exchange and communication about what do I need, what's there, does it match, and if not, then how do we talk about what we really need to fill the gap?
The other thing is it's not a reflow thing, but it's another resource I'll mention because it's a month-long conference I'm participating in virtually right now, actually. And I don't know that they
Okay,
can get into it or not, but it's called the Connected Learning Society.
okay,
I can send you a link, but they could also Google Connected Learning Society and see it's folks who are kind of at the intersection of learning in some kind of collaborative and digital space, and also research about that. So it's like
mhm,
those three kind of parties, and
okay,
sometimes you learn things that you might not know would be resources you could use in a classroom, or techniques, or you discover connection. So if any of the teachers are interested in that kind of space,
mhm,
CLS is what it's evolved into now, and it's kind of interesting, and it might be worth some of the educators time to
mhm.
plug into that down the road. So,
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Well, I'm sure you're going to be sharing the resources with us. I've got those little distractions too at some point, so don't worry about that. Um, yeah, we look forward to seeing the resources. We'll post it in the appropriate part of Inspired for sure. Um, let me finish up by just asking any sort of final thoughts or sort of big picture thoughts that come into your mind that you want to share with the teachers about maybe the experience you've had with working with other teachers, or how they can work with their students to further the awareness and interest in being part of keeping our watershed, our nature, our rich nature here in Milwaukee, in great shape for future generations and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's a big question. I would say, to the extent that students can drive the process, there's much more, it's much more effective. Like at every level of education I've been a participant in, there's some teachers who are able to kind of create that space that really allows the
Hmm.
students to shine. And I'm sure that, most of, if not all of you, are those kinds of teachers where you get that moment of like you're providing that space for your student to really like step into their strong suit, even if they didn't know it was a strong suit yet. So
Yep.
I think like if they're and these kinds of resources aren't the strong suit for every kind of student, like that's clear, but there are some for whom it may be like the opportunity to really shine and grow. So I'm when you ask that question, I'm reflecting on working with Golda. There was one student who really loved to take over the programming thing. Like he just jumped into it as like I was like, okay, you're gonna take that. Like you got this. Like you're driving the bus here. Like he knows more about that platform than I do now, and he's a middle schooler.
Hmm.
So
Right.
like having that humility as an adult to let let students who really get into something go with it, I think
Yep.
is probably much more teachers. The teachers on this call are probably much more in that space than I am. But like I've observed that as well through the possibility of some of these resources, and I think that generating that kind of excitement about the local problems and solutions is part of that way to that, like what do we want in 50 years, or how are we getting better,
Hmm.
where are we growing. I think it's got to be that kind of energy, because there's a lot of opportunity for people to think that it's somewhere else, like they have to go away after graduation, or whatever threshold, like the opportunity is somewhere else. To me, it's very important that Milwaukee, there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of opportunities, like it's a space worth nurturing. And so we're trying to highlight some of both the problems and the opportunities, um, and what is great and rich about it. So celebrating what's good can help support solving the challenges of what's not so good. I think
Hmm.
I think we're kind of cognizant of all of those things, and there's always a push and pull. But that it's long-winded, but that's what I would say. Let the students drive a process that would be the really most fulfilling to them, probably sticks with them the longest. And if if there's a way that our resources can help with that, then that's great. That's golden. That would be what we would hope for. So
Hmm. Perfect. That's a great summary, and recommendation to the teachers that again is very much in line with what we're hoping they will be able to not only design but practice.
sure,
Part of the reason why we designed the fellows program is to give those teachers the opportunity to experience for themselves what it feels like, um, to get that space and to search for your path into um, figuring out what the solution is for the problem that you identify. And so if you haven't experienced that yourself, you can't really model that and coach students to be able to do that. So, and because this is a new for many teachers, who have taught in the traditional, sit in your seat, listen to me, and do the quiz type of approach. Not to diminish, all the other stuff that goes on, but to sort of reduce it to what's what we think is not so good. Um, it's a new experience for the teachers, and we want them to be able to practice that in a safe environment where we're guiding them along the way. So I'm really glad you brought that up at the end, and I think the summary of this video, when I post a video, the summary will headline: Milwaukee is a space worth preserving, or I forget the word already. You said you used a different word. Milwaukee is worth nurturing. That's even a better word. I love that. So we'll lead with that in the communication and journalism speak, and um, and make sure that people watch your video and explore what you have to offer as Reflo. Um, I really appreciate you making the time in your busy summer season for talking with us and sharing with the fellows what Reflo has as resources that they might be able to dig into and plan to use with their students. Good luck with the Green Consortium Conference. That's always, we've been there as Learn Deep, so we know what it's like. It's a good way to network and to learn about other resources in town. And best of luck with your work, and hopefully we can get you really engaged with the teachers as they go into the new school year with their learning experience and their students working on projects.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to meeting with the fellows. It's going to be an exciting summer.
Well, you have your invitation for the second week of the STEM Studio. We look forward to seeing you there, and hopefully we'll have some really engaging discussion about sort of the feedback from you all's perspective to the fellows as they present their prototype, their draft prototype of what they've come up with so far. So
Cool.
Look forward to hearing about that and seeing you on that Monday morning.
That sounds good.
All right.
Take care.
You have a wonderful weekend, Michael.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.